Hi everyone, my name's John. I'm on the DevRel team at Arize, and today I'm going to walk you through a quick example of how you can trace and evaluate an Agno agent. In this case, we're going to use an agent that is a policy analyst for us, and we're going to evaluate that using Arize AX. So we're going to get to this view that you see here, where we're tracking the individual runs of our agent. We're tracking things like the individual tools that it invokes. So we're going to use a DuckDuckGo search tool here, along with some reading article tools and things like that that it can use, as well as its LLM calls, attaching some evaluations to those LLM calls, and we're going to see what kind of responses it gets back. So a little bit of a preview here, but you can see that in this case, we're treating it as a senior policy analyst who advises our government institutions here. And in this case, we're going to have given it a specific topic to research here, which is the future implications of artificial intelligence regulation. And so you can see as we run the agent, it's going to go through lots of different tool calls here to make certain searches for relevant terms, and then actually visiting those different pages that it returns. So you can see the read article tools that get invoked here. And then finally, if I scroll past some of those, we'll get to the very bottom after it reads all its articles, and then it will construct a final response back and then give us back this nicely formatted markdown regulation report here. So let's look at how we actually have set this up in code and how we set up the tracing, and then we'll come back and look at the eval section as well. So fortunately, Agno makes this really easy to set up, and Arize makes it very, very easy to trace. So we're going to walk through the example here. First thing is I'm installing a few different libraries. So I'm going to use DuckDuckGo search. I'm also going to use our open inference instrumentation package for Agno. And so this is something we've released recently that automatically captures traces on Agno invocations. And then we're using OpenAI as our underlying model, and I am going to instrument that as well too, just so we get extra rich tracing information there. And then in this case, I am going to import Arize as well. And so I've already kind of captured my keys here, so I will add those in. We're going to add in a space key and then some keys for our different packages. So I'm going to skip ahead and then add these in. Great, so I've added my keys, and now I can run this next call here to connect us to Arize within this notebook. And so I'm just making this register call to connect to Arize with those various different keys and under the project name Agno Agents Cookbook. And then I'm calling both of these two individual instrumenters here that will automatically trace and capture any calls that you make to either Agno or OpenAI. So actually, if you just go use those libraries from now, all of the calls to those libraries will be traced into Arize AX for you, and so you'll be able to see them there. And then I'm going to build up an Agno agent here. And so this is again, our policy research agent. So we're having it, we're going to use an agent here where we've given it DuckDuckGo tools and then a newspaper tool as well so that it can read through some of the results that it finds. And then you see we're giving it its description here. You're a senior policy analyst. You guys can read that from there. And then we're going to give it its instructions to go through various different phases to come up with a response for us. And then its expected output, which is one very nice feature of Agno, is that you can also define these expected outputs so that you can have more of this structured response that we see. And so we're going to have it print in Markdown, show its tool calls, and then add the current date time so that it knows that all the models that we call know what's happening in the world and where we are today. So I can run that, and that prepares the policy research agent. And then I could go from there and call it with whatever input I want. So you see we did the implications of artificial intelligence and regulation worldwide. We can go for that again. And now it's going to run through. You might get some warnings depending on where you're running this. I think I'm running this locally and I don't have a widget I need for Jupyter support. So I think I'm going to see that warning a few times. But it'll take maybe 30 seconds or so for this to run. So I'm going to skip ahead as we go. Okay, so our run took about a minute, so it took a little bit longer than I thought. So let's jump into Arise and see what happened there, if there's anything that made it take an extra long time. So I'll jump in, and so you can see that now I actually have two traces. I have one that we just ran here. You can see we just finished it about a minute ago. And we'll pull it up, and we'll see what happened here. So I see a lot of DuckDuckGo searches here. And so those actually look to be okay. So I think but I'm seeing some output of none from some of these, which makes me think that I might have gotten a rate limiting error and something like that for DuckDuckGo. So that might have been what took us a little bit longer. I can see that the actual first invocation call took about 25 seconds there, and then all of our DuckDuckGo searches executed pretty quickly. But then our final call also took a good bit of time as well too. So it looks like the LLM calls themselves were actually the slowest part of our run here. So that's something that we could take and go back to from there. But let's take a look at what we got back. I think this looks fairly similar to what we saw in the previous one, but let's see if there's any glaring issues. So it looks a little bit sparser, which is interesting, but overall, all in all, it looks good. So we can continue kind of testing and going back and forth, like looking through our traces here. But the more scalable way to do this is to add some evaluations. So we could add in either evaluations to use in experiments with this preset list of inputs, or in this case, we could just automatically add evaluations to these traces that we're capturing. So let's look at how we could do that in Arize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the evals and tasks section here, and I'm going to create a new eval and task. And I've actually got a couple that we've already run, so we're going to copy from some of those. But let's do one that goes through format, or response format, basically, because we have our expected output format within our Agno agent. And so we want to set up a way to see if we're actually following that format. And so we could do this with a kind of more of a code-based check. In this case, I'm just going to do this with a LLM eval here, just to kind of keep it simple. And so I could go through and define everything I want this eval to look like. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use another tool in Arize AX here, which is the Copilot, to build myself a little LLM template here on the fly. So I want to say the format of the response matches the expected, matches the input. Okay. And then we'll build that. It'll take a few seconds to run through and kind of come up with an evaluation template for us, but it should also be able to automatically add in things like the input messages, output messages, and things like that to automatically pull from our different traces. And so what will happen is the template that gets generated here will get automatically filled in with the different run information and then sent through to another LLM that we can use to evaluate. And so it came up with a title for us here and then came up with some examples here too. And so I'm actually going to change this up because I do want it to use attributes.llm. I want it to use the output messages from our LLM instead of kind of the all up ones. So let's do the responses output messages, and we'll just grab the first message there. And content is what we want from that. And I'll do the same kind of thing with this. We'll do attributes.llm.input messages dot zero content. And you know what, just in case, I'm going to be a little bit redundant here potentially, but add in a second message as well too, in case the system message is coming through there. And so then you'll see that we're also specifying the output format and the format match versus mismatch is going to be our labels there. So you can use that. And so I can go ahead and create that. And then you'll see that that task gets created here, and I can actually go in and I can go to the project traces where that's happening. I can view the associated evals and tasks here. So you can see some previous ones that I've run. If I refresh the page, we should see our new one coming up here. And so now if I jump back into our traces here, you can click in and I can see that I now have one eval that's been attached here to our various runs. So in this case, the format matches what's expected here, and I can see the explanation that's coming back from that. So that all looks okay there. And what I could do is I could define whatever other kinds of evaluations that I wanted to measure my agent here. So if you look at some of the tasks I had done previously, I've included one for conciseness or relevancy here too. So you can see I've added another one that is saying, okay, we're going to see whether the response is relevant and concise, and then return back a response there. And so what I could do is I could actually just go here and let's say I'm going to run it on historical data just so it reruns on our existing amount. But I could also set that to run as new traces come in, and I could kind of view it in that way. And so I could set it up to continually run as we see new traces come through. And then you'll see there's going to be logs that go through, and I can see, okay, 2 successes. That looks like it worked properly there. And then I can jump back into my project, and I should see those same new traces there. So now I should have 2 evals. There we go. And I can see I've got relevant and matching format. Now I could even take this one step further. Say I was going to deploy this into production and I was going to want to view my evals from there. I could actually go and I could create dashboards that show me these eval results as well too. So I'll quickly show you how we would do that. Or I can go through, there'll be a base dashboard that's available to me, just tracking things like token counts for completions and prompts and things like that. And then what I might want to do is I'm going to also add in, I'm going to add in a new distribution here for one of our amounts or one of our evals. I'll put it up here. And then I can click into here and I can say, okay, this is going to be a Agno agents cookbook, and we're going to do this over an evaluation as opposed to a property. And we want to look for, let's do our format matching label. And so we'll say this matches, this is our matches format. And I'll say this is matches right here. And then I can create our chart from there. And so now I can create our split for matches format there. And I could click into this and see our full amounts there. It looks like 2 of our traces matched and 3 other previous ones did not. And I could click through to view those traces and spans and try to understand a little bit more of what was going on with those particular examples here. And so I can use this to trace in production what spans are not matching. I could even add alerts from here as we go and we modify our different traces from there. So hopefully this gave you a good idea of some of what you can do with Agno and Arize in combination here. Build really useful agents quickly with Agno that are going to be robust there, and then use Arize AX in this case to evaluate, add those different evaluations, build your dashboards, build different heads-up displays to understand how your agents are performing and where you can improve them. Thanks very much, and we'll see you in the next one.